Good morning and welcome. So it's great to have you here for the first webinar in our open online course. Welcome one and all. As you'll have seen, we're going to be using Slido throughout this session, so please do log in, so either via your phone or your laptop or iPad, anything really that has internet. So you can do it two ways, either slido.com and put in the code, or there's a QR code on the screen now. So if you have a smartphone, just open up your camera function. You don't need to take a photo, you just sort of hover the camera over the QR code and it should come up with a little link that'll take you straight to the bit that we'll be using. Just so that everyone can sort of hear and has a fairly clear line, we'd suggest that people put themselves on mute. But obviously if you do have questions, I'm very happy for you to unmute yourselves as well. So there's four of us who'll be talking you through today's content. We've got Natasha Mays, who will have been in contact with you via email already, and she's on the line doing all of the support stuff. So if you have any questions, technical questions about connecting or anything else, you can use the chat function. Questions about the content of the course, we'd like you to use Slido, and Natasha will be monitoring both of those. Natasha, do you want to say a quick hello?
Good morning.
And then I'm next on the lineup. My name's Alice and I'm part of the Demand Capacity team, and I've been overseeing kind of the coordination of this course. So I'll be on all of the webinars going forward. If you have any questions about the course more generally, then I'm very happy for you to ask me either via the Slido question and answer or just outside of this session. I'm very happy for you to contact. And then we've got Matthew. Matthew, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, everybody.
And then last but certainly not least, we've got Lilu Wheeler, who is joining us to bring a bit of a kind of real life perspective to it all. So Lilu, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hello all, I'm Lilu.
And we'll all be happy to sort of answer questions as we go through as well. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. This is really your kind of, I don't know, beginner's guide, I guess, to what is demand capacity, why might you want to undertake it, things to think about as you're starting your journey. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of the course overall, so what you'll be expecting over the next few weeks. And then we'll go into the content with Matthew and Lilu really kind of bringing it to life. Now, as I said, for questions and answers, we'll be using the Slido function. So if you haven't already connected to it, this is probably a good time to do that. We're using Slido for a couple of reasons. One, it means that you're only using one platform, which is quite convenient, but also you've got the option of voting on questions. So if there's a question someone else has answered and you're like, oh, that's exactly what I was about to ask, you can like it. Have I just been muted? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. For some reason it suddenly went on to mute. So yeah, please do use Slido to use questions, to ask questions as we go through, and you can like other people's questions. So if there's something you're particularly interested in the answer to, there's that option there as well. So in terms of the course schedule, these are all the dates that we're going to have the webinars, but really in some ways the webinars are the linchpins of the different content as you go through. So it really is going to be about you looking at how that applies in your different settings. I know some of you, quite a few of you are from provider organisations, some are from commissioning organisations. There's a real mix. So how you apply the content is going to vary quite a bit from person to person. But I'd encourage you to sort of invest a bit of time in your own projects if you've got one in between. And it will probably, I think we might have someone who's unmuted with maybe a bit of background. Oh, there we go. The more you invest in your project outside of these sessions, the more you're likely to be able to get from the sessions. So in terms of having access to speakers and being able to answer questions, if you're really pushing on, you're going to have a bit more to get out of them. But either way, these are the dates. If there are any particular ones you can't do, all the recordings will be online and you'll be able to watch them and catch up. but we hope we'll be able to do most of them in person. And then towards the end of the course, so overlapping with the last couple of webinars and for a couple of weeks afterwards, we've got mentoring sessions that are available. So as I said, the way that this is applied will be quite different for different people, and we recognise that that nuance of how you apply it can be quite tricky and it can be quite in depth. So if you have been on the course the whole way through and you're now applying it and you really want a bit of help to unpick what that means for you and how it's going to work, you can book in a session with our team, and there'll be two members of the team who'll be able to talk you through what it is you're doing, maybe look at some of your models if you've got models that you want to kind of unpick or understand or you're getting stuck. Those sessions we'll be advertising how you can sign up for them later on in the course. But we would ask that you either attend or rewatch all of the webinars before coming on those mentoring sessions, just because it means that we can kind of we can go in knowing that you've covered that content already. But we'll give a bit more detail of that as we go through. So that is plenty enough of my talking. We'd like to do a quick check-in just to see how everyone's doing. So if you have a little look at that smiley emoji face spectrum, have a little think about which of those emoji faces most sums you up. And if you go onto your Slido, either on your phone or on your web, you can enter in which emoji face is summing you up this morning. And I won't take any of it personally. Oh, so tired is coming up really. Tired, so, happy, good, nice to see. We've got a couple of people feeling super, hungry. Feel free if anyone ever wants to have breakfast while they're doing these webinars. I again will not be in the slightest bit offended if you feel like you want to multitask with breakfast. Only 18 of you so far. I'll give it a little bit of time. If anyone's having any trouble getting onto Slido, do feel free to put something in the chat box and we should be able to help you kind of navigate your way on if you're getting a bit stuck. Okay, so a mix of tired, so, happy, fine. So fine, good, super, all about the same level, or exactly the same level actually, with a smattering of people who either haven't had breakfast or would like a second breakfast. Thank you for that, guys. It's really useful for us to get a little bit of a sense of where you're at. So lots of people tired. I will try not to send you all to sleep and try and kind of bring in a bit of energy. But please do ask questions as we go through. There's a lot of people on the call, so we won't be able to kind of unmute everyone for a question and answer session. But I really do want people to get involved. So do let us know what it is that's popping into your head or kind of not necessarily puzzling you, but it's just something you want to know the answer to. So starting your demand and capacity journey. For us, I feel like this is very much about patience. The reason most of us started working in the NHS in the first place was because we want to help people, and patients are really at the core of what we do and why we do it. We're going to talk a little bit about waiting lists and how that impacts patients and how we can help to kind of manage that process a little bit more. But it is the absolute kind of core of why we do what we do. Sadly, we're all probably quite aware of when things go wrong and that we're in a system that's really struggling at the moment. So this course isn't specifically around COVID, but obviously we're very aware that for most of you, what you're looking at the moment is going to be through the lens of COVID and understanding how these principles apply because of that, we will be kind of weaving in as we go along, and we'll definitely be making reference to it. And then the final module is about specifically looking at how we can apply these principles in the current setting. But it's a particularly stark reminder, I guess, of how much is needed and how things are at the moment. On a slightly more positive note, we're going to just show you a very short video now, which is about a patient's experience, and also just to kind of, I suppose, focus us all on why it is we're doing what we're doing, and what can be the benefits when we get it right.
Hugh works in education, he loves cooking foods from around the world, and he lives in Buckinghamshire. Throughout his life, Hugh has had a severe nut allergy. In his 40s, Hugh's allergy became more severe and frequent. At times he couldn't breathe with facial angioedema. Each time an ambulance would take Hugh directly to A&E to have his symptoms treated. Each time he was discharged back home. This took place over 8 months. His mental and emotional health was greatly affected, until Hugh went to his GP for further investigation. The GP referred him to a specialist, who found a course of treatment which stopped his symptoms. This video explains how accessing this treatment in a timely manner changed his life. Let's hear Hugh tell his story.
I've been a patient of the NHS since the early 70s for various things over the years. Most recently, I went through a series of near anaphylactic reactions due to a tree nut allergy I'd had for many, many years, but for some reason it was triggering monthly, and it went on for, in the end, what turned out to be 8 months before I was able to be referred to a specialist and see what it was as a problem. Less of a physical response, in the sense that I was already having a physical reaction most months, which had led me to A&E. I was very familiar with the local paramedics after so many visits. No, the problem was emotional, mostly, because I was living in a state of fear. I was very, very uncertain. The fact that I had not had an anaphylaxis that went to the throat meant that after several months of visits to A&E, were like, well, just go home because it's not life-threatening, but it could be. That possibility, this could be life-threatening, was terrifying. I had to police everything I ate and drank every day. So waiting to know what was the problem and how to deal with it had a very strong emotional toll. My life has become far more secure and confident in this particular area. The specialist was amazing, addressed the issue directly head on, was confident that he had the right diagnosis from the start, referred back to the GP immediately, wrote the letter there in the appointment, and while it was a relatively long-term solution, nevertheless we pursued it, and he was right, and it has changed my life. Remember that what you are planning, while it's numbers on a spreadsheet, there are people involved. Sometimes you have to put that aside because it's your job to manage things factually, but please do remember that nevertheless there are consequences for people, and that your decision may be practical and it may help what you're trying to do in your role, but it might have a very, very serious consequence for someone's daily life, and that can take a very, very extreme toll.
So just a little reminder, I guess, of certainly for me why I think it's important and why I kind of feel like it's something that I really want to invest more time in. I'm now going to hand over to Matthew, who's going to take us through some of the applications of what we've been talking about here.
Thanks, Alice. So what we want to go on and explore now is how can our understanding of demand and capacity help? So essentially, when there's a mismatch between our capacity and demand, that then tends to be one of the main reasons why backlogs develop, why waiting lists increase and waiting times increase for patients. So we can see on the chart on this slide, the waiting list increasing over time, with the effect of COVID measures included quite starkly. And obviously, this is going to bring significant pressures to the system. So understanding of our demand and capacity is probably more crucial and more important now than at any time. So if we carry on thinking about some of the themes around understanding demand and capacity, essentially it's around providing an evidence base to support decision making and improving our patient experience. So here we can see that we're looking at modelling the required level of capacity, calculating the minimum waiting list sizes, understanding the impact of clearing our excess waiting list sizes down to the ideal levels that we calculated, and identifying then any potential inefficiencies. And whilst we're not covering the detail of that today, then in some of the future sessions that Alice showed us earlier on, then we will be covering a lot more of this detail. Ultimately then, this helps us with supporting better and informed decision making, which is really, really crucial. Our ultimate goal is around improving the experience for patients, and in many cases that experience is actually to wait less time for that first appointment or that treatment with the clinician. So back to Slido, we've got another question for you. So what's motivated you to start your demand and capacity journey and to be joining us here today? So if you can head back over to Slido and give us some feedback. And it'd be really interesting to see what your thoughts are.
My boss. So I feel like maybe it'd be unfair to ask it, but I do feel like we always have a few people on these courses who've been voluntold. I feel like the NHS is quite big on voluntelling. Understand self-development. Increasing waiting lists. Yeah, I think that's probably it's a very real thing that we're all grappling with at the moment. New job, new skills. Someone has put in voluntold. Waiting list challenge. And although it's come up in a couple of different ways, so it's not necessarily the biggest word, I do wonder if that is one of the biggest themes in terms of waiting lists. Yes. As Matthew said, we will be looking at waiting lists in quite a bit of detail as we go through the course. So we'll be looking at the kind of practicalities of how to do that and how to understand the metrics that you've got. It's quite encouraging for me that voluntold is quite small and that most of you do want to be here either for self-development or to get a better understanding.
And also to see service improvement on there, then that's really, really pleasing to see, because ultimately, as we've alluded to already, and we will talk about a bit later on, then it's about service improvement and patient experience that ultimately is what this journey is about.
I don't know if we mentioned earlier on, so Lilu, who's joining us today, was part of our Demand and Capacity Trainer programme. And I do wonder, Lilu, whether these words are quite representative of why people joined that programme as well.
Yeah, definitely. It looks very familiar. I guess at the start we didn't really know what to expect. Somebody had either said it was a good idea to join, and some of us were interested in improving the service. But I think that's really important to hold in mind, that it is essentially about service improvement.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, guys. Quickly go back to the slides.
Fab, thank you. So as part of our journey, we wanted to look at some myths and to bust some of those myths. And some of this has come from some of the training sessions we've put on previously, some of our knowledge and some of the feedback we've had from colleagues out in organisations approaching some of their demand and capacity journeys. And in future modules, we'll cover some of this in a lot more detail, but today we just wanted to cover at high level a few of these themes. So it's not just a technical exercise, and demand and capacity and modelling isn't something that's solely done by specialist analysts within your organisations. We'll talk a lot about data as we go forward, but gaps in the data sometimes are caused by recording issues, data quality, or the infrastructure in terms of systems. And whilst sometimes these can be quite frustrating and may complicate your journey, they're not obstacles to delivering your modelling. And in many cases, and certainly some of the experiences I've had working with some operational colleagues, they're actually indicators of actions for further improvement as part of an action plan for working forward to improve the quality of the data. And our last point on this slide, you will become a detective. And I think that's probably one of the really interesting parts of the whole demand and capacity journey, that you become a detective investigating all manner of processes and issues, some of which that have been previously hidden. And again, these all serve to help improve your pathway and the journey for your patient.
Yeah, I think the idea that you can lock an analyst into a little darkened room and that they'll somehow magically know exactly how a service runs is a commonly held misbelief.
Absolutely. So carrying on with some of our myths, sometimes with modelling, it's a case of thinking of, well, it's simply last year plus or minus a little bit more, and how big that bit is might depend on the organisation. Nothing more scientific than that. Well, it's really not the case. It's got no relevance to operational delivery. No, not at all. And it only needs to be done once. The more models you complete, the more you work with operational colleagues, the more you'll find that actually to keep up with the pace of change, your models will need refreshing and updating. And as you work through an iterative cycle of exploring actions and issues, then you'll want to keep on updating those. It's no impact on patients. Absolutely not. The whole of your demand and capacity journey is around improving patient experience, improving experience for the clinicians working with those patients. And it's probably one of the biggest things here is that it's about improving that patient journey. Populating the models, very mathematical, statistical, and hence complicated. Actually, once you've understood some of the processes involved, actually filling the models in themselves is probably one of the more straightforward parts of your journey. And in some of our modules coming up over the next couple of weeks, once you work through that in more detail, then you'll really see how you can get to grips with that and how you can make a big difference within your organisations.
I saw a couple of hands come up, and I don't know if that was people wanting to ask questions or whether it was just a kind of show of support for the impact on patients. I'm also hoping that the video at the beginning has somewhat persuaded you that it does obviously impact patients. Now, Natasha, are there any questions that have come in? I'm looking at the questions thing on my Slido, and the only one I can see is from Colin saying hello all and 9 people liking it, which just makes me smile. So
so mainly questions around slides and kind of background information, nothing directly about slides at the moment.
Okay, so as we've mentioned previously, it's all about improvement, and we've shown the plan, do, study, act cycle here because we think that this approach is really fundamental in terms of delivering really robust modelling. So in terms of your demand and capacity journey, ultimately what we're looking for is sustained improvements in service delivery, and these come about from combining the analytics and the data and operational knowledge in an iterative cycle with all of your key stakeholders working closely together. And when you get it right, it really does serve as the basis for planning services and planning change within your service. And when you're successful, it's when it's embedded as standard practice. So that plan, do, study, act cycle informs your modelling in terms of actually you will go through numerous cycles, you'll go through numerous iterations and numerous scenarios. You'll plan the model, you'll work with the services and complete it, review it, and at that stage you may well go back round that cycle again and update it, make amends, make changes, make refinements, and go through that loop again before you get to the stage of actually acting on some of those outputs and making some changes. But this is always really worth bearing at the back of your mind as you go through your journey, and over the next few weeks as you explore some of those different steps through that journey, do refer back to this one and keep this one at the forefront of what you're thinking about. It's really important that we keep on delivering improvement. And Lilu, I wondered if you had any examples at this stage.
Yeah, I was going to say it was really useful looking at this now and thinking actually it's about starting small rather than thinking you're the person that's going to change this modelling sort of throughout the whole organisation and be leading on that. And actually, when you think of it as an improvement project,
oh my gosh, it's Lilu Wheeler. This is my best friend from East London. Look.
Sorry. So yeah, it's really useful to kind of think of it as something that's going to be, you start in small steps, and it's not kind of one's model fits all. You need to keep looking at it, like you were saying earlier about, it's not just done once, sadly. Yeah, you do need to go through a few times.
Need the volume up, don't we?
Thank you.
So just before we move on, we've got one question that's come in via Slido from Alex. So do you think anyone can do this, and what are the top skills required by people working in demand and capacity planning?
That's a really good question, isn't it, at this stage in our journey? Yes, I would say absolutely anyone can do it. I think what's important, and we will cover this a bit more later on, and again I think in future weeks, is it's really important to get the right team of people together to do this. So I think we we mentioned earlier that it's not just about the analysts and the data. It's really crucial that you get the right mix of people. So obviously your analysts are going to play a key role, your operational service leads. Within the service, there are other key people that will be able to provide really valuable insight and support, and that's thinking of maybe your admin staff, your booking staff, some of the clinicians actually delivering the care and delivering the services might well have a really good understanding of what some of the issues they're experiencing are, or where there are blockages in your pathway, or problems that are being encountered. It's really crucial to have some oversight of the project and the process in place. So ideally from your someone from your executive team, and we've found numerous good examples of demand and capacity modelling where someone has played the role of almost like a critical friend that can support the process, but also challenge some of the process as you go through that journey. So that's challenging some of the data, challenging some of the assumptions, and also challenging some of the operational delivery as well. So someone that's got a good handle on both sides of that and can be supportive, but can also be challenging. And then some of the top tips, we'll cover some of those a bit later on today, so I'll hold fire on that one. I don't know, Alice or Lilu, if there's anything else you want to add to that?
No, nothing else at this stage.
I think Lilu's bit might cover this a bit as well. In terms of skills, I think there's a lot which is around people skills. I think there is this misconception that it's a data exercise, and although you obviously will need some data, actually a lot of the harder work and the more consistent work is with people. So it's that linking up, it's having conversations, and it's not exactly a skill, it's more quality. I would say patience, having the determination and the patience to just keep working at it, and you will get your wins as you go along. I've seen a lot of people do the various different types of demand and capacity training that we offer. And I've had a lot of people say, oh, Alice, I don't think this is for me. I don't think I'll ever be able to do it. Inevitably, they do. If you really want to do it, that's the thing that makes a difference. Having the right people, communicating, linking up, and having that kind of determination and tenacity to keep going. Where people don't do it, where people kind of start and then leave it, I would say that's mostly when people were wanting it to be a magic bullet, which sadly we don't have any of. If I had them, I would have just, handed them out to everyone by now. Or where they were voluntold and they don't really themselves buy into it. And I don't think there's much we can do to help you with that aspect of it. But the learning and understanding the nitty-gritty bit, I can say with some confidence that by the time you get to the end of this course, we'll be able to get you to the point where you understand it. And then the relationship stuff is going to just all be about time investment as you go along.
I think that time investment is crucial, isn't it? Because I think with the demand and capacity journey, it's very much the amount of time and the amount of resource you can put into it. That investment will really pay dividends with what you actually get out at the end of not just the journey, but the models themselves. So that's a key one. And just thinking back a few slides to our little detective, you really need to ask those key questions and bear that detective icon in mind in terms of it is about delving deeper, it is about challenging the data, challenging the assumptions, and posing those key questions.
I think in our virtual worlds, I think it's even more important, and you're having to spend more time building that, the planning and building and prepping with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. So we're starting on our journey. One way that we've visualized that is to think of it as a big puzzle. There are a number of key component parts, and we've picked on 6 of them here that we think play a really fundamental role in terms of developing your demand and capacity process and models. And those cover ownership, they cover pathway mapping. We talked about data, and that's the capacity data and the demand data. We know that governance plays a key role, and there's also something around about sustainability. And we'll go on to look at each of these in a little bit more detail. So we've termed this the art of the possible, and this is really where we think if you take those pieces of your puzzle and you're able to invest the time, the resource and the support from your organization, this is where ultimately you'd be aiming to get to have a really robust modeling process and demand and capacity process in place. So if we started with our pathway mapping, then that would become an ongoing activity that becomes integrated into your normal business management. It becomes reviewed regularly, and the knowledge used for further improvement, such as refining clinical pathways or using different scenarios for development. The demand data, well, that becomes collected routinely, and systems used to give service and operational managers warnings of changes in trend or behaviours that allows them to make informed decisions around how they might want to respond to some of those changes. Our capacity information, and this is probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people face when it comes to completing their modelling, is sourcing their capacity information, and we'll cover that in a lot more detail in a future session. But to get to that place of having a really robust series of models and processes, this will be available routinely, regularly updated, closely linked to rotas, work plans, and workforce systems to allow management of workload and capacity at both the service level and the individual level. The ideal would be that the modelling becomes sustainable in terms of being integrated into your business as usual processes and workflows. It's routinely used to plan, and that's not just the short term, but also longer term. And processes become built into standard operating procedures, and skills of those involved in the modelling processes and the demand and capacity processes are refreshed on a regular basis. Governance framework is really crucial, and having that in place in a way that it's reviewed regularly and evaluated to ensure it's fit for purpose for your organisation's needs. And that goes on with the modelling being fully embedded across all services, and the demand and capacity metrics and methods being really well understood and used across the organisation. And again, these will be covered in a lot more detail over the coming weeks. And lastly, out of our 6 pieces of the puzzle, the ownership of the modelling, well, that needs to be really clearly defined, with key roles, key responsibilities defined for all those stakeholders involved. And in answering the question earlier, we talked about operational, clinical, the analysts in the informatics team, senior management, and those critical friends. Clear lines of accountability and timelines linked to the planning and reporting schedules are when you know that this has been fully embedded and it's in a really robust way within the organisation. We know that where we're all starting out on this journey, obviously we're not in that place, but we're going to give you the knowledge, the skills, the tips over the next few weeks that will show you how you can make a start, but also work towards achieving this over time.
And I just want to say it's it's quite a long shopping list in a way of all the things that you can achieve through demand and capacity work. I think for most people, and Lulu, do contradict me if I've got it wrong here, I think for most people you might get a bit of a win on one of those to start and then others follow. Well, can you hear me? Yeah, there was a bit of disturbance. I think you can often see a bit of a win on one of those and others follow. You're unlikely to have the full set right from the start.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's about shoring up some of the processes and improve that, but you may not get all of it at once.
So we have a couple of questions. They're mostly about the course, so I will just answer them, but by all means chip in if anyone else has any thoughts. So will all the models be built in, are all the models built in Excel, and do you use specialist demand and capacity software? So there's kind of two parts to answering that question. Firstly, we're quite happy for you to use any model that you want to use. You don't have to use our models to apply the theory that we're going to be going through in this course, but we do obviously have our own models. So if you look on our website, you'll be able to see all the models that are available at the moment, and we do build them all in Excel. And the main reason we do this is because we want them to be totally freely accessible. And as much as there's a whole range of other things you can do with fancier software, not everyone would be able to access it and not everyone would be able to use it. And it's really important to us that it is open and available to everybody. So we use Excel. The technical team or the technical part of our team have developed them themselves. I feel like they may have pushed the boundaries slightly on what Excel can do. Certainly I didn't know it could do everything that they make it do. It's like, if you've only ever seen a racehorse and then you see dressage, it's like a completely different thing. But they are quite useful still. They're quite powerful tools. You can do a lot with them without having the kind of slightly fancier software. Having said that, and we will go through this in more detail later, there are ways of linking the models to systems that you've got in your own trusts or in your own organizations. So if you have access to some of that fancier forecasting technology, for instance, you can import in what you forecast your demand is going to be. I won't go into any more detail now because that would be a whole session in its own right, but we will definitely cover that, which leads on to the next question, which is, are we going to go through an example model in the course? So yes, absolutely we are. We will walk through the core model, which is the model that we produce that people use the most. So that's the one we're going to start with. We'll also talk through what the other models are that we provide and some of the pros and cons and how to use them and how to choose which model is most appropriate. But as I said, if you have an in-house model that you're happy with and that you want to continue using, that's absolutely fine. We don't really mind what models people use. It's more about the theory and the principles that underpin how you use them. And that's going to be more of a focus on this course. And no matter what modeling tool you decide to use for the mentoring sessions, we're very happy to talk through any of them. So I hope that answered the question. If it didn't, post a follow-up question. I am checking them as we go along, and we should be able to just kind of hopefully unpick anything else if that didn't quite answer the question. I'm now gonna hand over to Lilu for the next slide.
So I'm going to talk to you a bit about what not to do. So when I first came on this journey, which was over a year ago now, I think it might be, Alice, yeah, time flies. I kind of expected to learn about how, what I would need to do, where I need to put the numbers in, and some kind of syntax or code, and something would come up and it would tell me how many people I would need in a service, and that was that. And actually, there was more to it, and as we alluded earlier, it's a bit more about the prep that you do and conversations that you have. And I'm finding that a lot of the time we're talking these days about integrated care and talking to partners, but actually sometimes we forget that within our own organisations that we should be talking to. So, you know, first off, we might be thinking of going to the analyst. QI teams are quite helpful as well, because they're already embedded in this kind of improvement work. But actually, it's sometimes the administrators that are working on collecting the data, and you need to make sure that you soon find out that it's actually correct data that you need, or good quality data, because whatever you put into this system, it's not going to mean very much if you haven't got the data there. I also worked on the complex model as opposed to the sort of original, you know, what was designed for acute trust, and so it was a lot more complex, I suppose, which good name for it, for community mental health trusts. And there was more to think about, which is why it's even more important that if you are one of the people that has been asked to attend or voluntold, it's a new word I've learned today, I think it's really crucial that you get other people on board and that you're not alone doing this. I think that's, you know, it makes it a lot harder, because I think you need to start off in small teams, and you need somebody there thinking with you about all the different layers that you're going to need. So yeah, don't be afraid of trying it out. It is an Excel spreadsheet. Nothing's going to happen. It's good to have a play around, and you know, even after this, you can have a look at the models and just see what's needed, because I think starting from there at the end, actually it helps you think about what you need at the beginning, or it did me. So yeah, just have a play around and see see what comes out with it. But yeah, definitely don't work on this on your own.
Thank you. Some really helpful advice there. And I think that key message about not working on your own and being part of a team and getting the right people around you and together is really, really crucial. So Lilu's given us some good advice there about what not to do. We wanted then to just cover off a few tips for a successful demand and capacity journey. And these wrap up some of the things we've talked about through these slides earlier today, but hopefully tips that you can bear in mind throughout your journey and in the modules over the next few weeks. So start with questioning. It's really, really crucial at the start of your process to be clear about the question that you're trying to answer and what you're going to do with the results when you've completed your model. Engagement, so that's engagement with your key stakeholders. So at the start of your journey, it's really keen to identify who those stakeholders are going to be and how you're going to engage together. I think Lilu mentioned earlier that obviously in this virtual world that we're working in at the moment, that sometimes can be more difficult. Sometimes it can be actually easier to get people together than where you're based in different locations and trying to travel to different locations. So a little bit of forward planning there, it pays dividends. Highlight anomalies and any known issues or issues that become evident through the process with the data that you're using. We talked earlier that that's not a reason not to keep going with your modeling and to develop your model, and then sometimes that forms a key part of your action plan, but it's really important to highlight that with your stakeholders so that everybody's aware of what some of those issues might be and the impact it might have on your model and what you're going to do about it. Use the data to test and validate some of your assumptions. It's really, really key that you use what's available to you, and sometimes some of the assumptions that you or your stakeholders come up with, they might be valid, they might not be, but it's really important to use the data you've got to test some of those. And lastly, thinking about what you're going to do with the results of your modelling and how you're going to communicate the outputs in a way that's meaningful and understandable to everybody involved. And often that's a case of how you might transpose the output of the model using non-technical terminology so that anybody that picks up the output or is briefed or sees the output understands what it's telling them, but also what you think you then need to do with that to go back full cycle to where we started this morning around improving patient care and patient access through your action plan.
So we've got a couple of questions that have come through. The number one question, so it's great that people are using the voting buttons, it's really helpful. The number one question is, will we discuss the differences in modelling for community services? I mean, the short answer is yes, but Matthew, do you want to talk a little bit about your experiences in modelling community services?
Sure.
Kind of
Yeah,
resident
I mean, my background's been working within community services, and I know Lilu's done a lot of work within mental health services, which are two service areas that I think often either become overlooked or don't have the same level of profile as probably our acute services do. And as we go through the modelling in future weeks, then absolutely we will cover how to approach modelling services within those service areas. What I would say from experience is that previous person asked whether the models were built in Excel, and yes, the Excel models are great for working with these service areas. They are transferable across different services and different sectors. The core model that Alice mentioned, which tends to be the key offer, works effectively for community services. There are other models within the portfolio of models that can also be used across those services. The tips probably for working with community services, I think, is data. So it's probably is around spending the time to check your data, to assess what data you've got available before you start the modelling, and probably the area that I think you usually end up spending most time with is looking at the capacity data and working with service and service leads about how you will either source the capacity data or work to validate the capacity data to ensure it's as robust as possible for your modelling.
Lily, do you want to add anything in from a mental health perspective?
Sorry, I was distracted by T-ball. Yeah, no, I was relieved to know that it was included. It was kind of later on, but I think there's more work. I say this, I think there's more work that is needed in terms of building teams, whereas with the acute you could sort of put in the data, and if you had it, you could kind of, I suppose, work up things on your own, but here you really do need to work in a team, and that's why I say sort of all parts of it, sort of from the admin and even kind of service user involvement there is quite important, and you find that other people have already thought about models already, and there's some work going on there, so you don't want to start from the beginning or duplicate as well. So it's worth finding out who's doing what currently, because there probably will be somebody doing something similar.
Yeah, and I would definitely echo what both of you said in terms of capacity, well, data generally. So this is a slight generalization, but I think acute services have been performance managed against their data for longer, and therefore they've been gathering it in the more standardized ways for longer. I think a lot of community mental health services probably gather their data in a wider range of different ways. So it's just about, you might need to spend a bit more time being a detective if you're working in a community mental health service than potentially if you're working in an acute, but we certainly have seen people do it and make it work. I would encourage you to use the Future NHS platform, which you'll be invited to after this webinar, to connect with each other, because there will be people in this group who are struggling with the same things as you at the same time. So don't do it on your own. And again, revisiting the option of the mentoring sessions towards the end of this course, there probably is a bit more work in terms of looking at the nuances of how you apply the models. And if you are getting stuck with that, sorry, do ask for help and do get in touch. So apologies. The next most asked question or liked question: will we be able to tweak your models or are they locked? Sorry. They are locked. Sorry, Matthew, could you just take over?
Yeah, the models are locked, as I think Alice was going to go on to say, but there are sections within the models where there is scope for you to be able to adjust or come up with different scenarios, alter some of the parameters, compare some of those parameters with each other. And as Alice mentioned, if you have a specific query around something you're trying to do with the model, then we can look at that with you, or you can post that through the Future NHS site and seek some advice and guidance in that way.
The other thing I wanted to say was, sorry, I don't know what's happened to my voice. We are willing to share the passwords to unlock them, but it comes with a health warning. So if you break it, we won't be able to fix it. Whereas if you don't unlock it, if you break it, we probably will be able to fix it. So the option is there, and it's just about deciding. So if you want to unlock it and have a play, with the caveat that if you break it, you're going to have to try and fix it yourself, just email us and we can send you through the password. So that is an option. But as I say, because it is sort of pushing the boundaries of what Excel is designed to do, it's amazing how if you tweak one little bit, something else goes pong. So it's not saying don't do it, but just with that health warning in place. Apologies for suddenly losing my voice. It's coming back now. Will we get support with your models? Absolutely. So these sessions are very much about covering those principles that underpin using the models, and use these as a chance to ask questions. You're going to be having a whole range of people speaking at each of the webinars who come with different expertise and different experience. So the more you do in your own time to really figure out what questions you need to ask, the more you will get out of this course. So it's going to be about going away, playing with it, digging in, starting to be that Sherlock Holmes detective in the background, figuring out what you have got already, what you don't, what you need help with. And then these sessions will really help to hopefully flesh that out. And if there's anything specific that you want support with, that's what those mentoring sessions are for. So you'll have access to 2 people in the team, can either be with just you, or if you're hopefully working as part of a small team, we can talk to that small team, whether they're on this course or not. And that will hopefully give you the support you need. We really want you to find, like at the end of this, if you invest the time, you should have a working model, but it will involve a lot of that detective work and digging through in the background. While I recover my voice, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I'd say, the technical side, as you said before, it's the easier bit. It's the bit that the team here can really support and help with, and sort of know that's fine. It's more the background work, which only you would know about your own organisation, sort of where you're going to get that data from. So yeah, don't worry about the technical side of it.
And the next question, I feel much better now. And the next question is, will we be discussing modelling for inpatient services? Absolutely. So inpatient services, I would say, is probably one of the ones that a lot of people have modelled. So you're not on new territory there. There's quite a few people that we can draw on, and we'll be looking at how you can put that data in when we're looking at the model. If you have tried it and you're getting stuck, again, do contact us, ask questions during the sessions, and we should be able to help kind of unpick that a little bit for you. But absolutely, we'll be covering how to do inpatients. And same for diagnostics, which has just come up. Can the models be used for diagnostic services? They absolutely can. So you have the option to put things in by minutes, so you can look at how at different diagnostic services inside one of the models. Oh, great! The questions are coming thick and fast now. Ambulance services. We can talk a little bit about that. It's not something that we've specifically looked at modelling, but certainly I think people have used the models to do that. We also have someone in our team who has previously worked in ambulance services. So if you are requesting a mentoring session and there's a particular area that you're interested in, do let us know and we'll try and make sure that we've got the team members who are kind of have the most expertise in those areas to support you. The principles will be the same no matter what service. It's in the nuance of applying it. Do you have mental health and community service models available on your website? Matthew, do you want to? I mean, the answer is yes and no. So none of the models are specific to any type of service, but Matthew, you've probably done the most in terms of using them in different settings.
Yeah, so they're on the website. There are populated and blank versions of all of the models. I would say for community and mental health services to look at the core model, the high complexity model, and also potentially one of the older models, the advanced flow model. So there are populated versions. You can see how you would fill them in and the kind of data items you need. The question then is to look at scoping the service you want to work with, and to look at how you would replicate the data for that model, or how you would look at the model being transferable to that service. And it's that bit of time initially in terms of scoping that is really important then in that case. Oh, I think you're on mute, Alice.
Oh yes, so I am. Someone else has put in a question which probably links in quite nicely with this. We've created several demand and capacity models and found that not one model fits all. So we have several Excel tools for each service. I think that's probably quite common.
Yes.
That's all round. I think you probably will have a bit of a mix and match. And again, that's something we're very happy to talk through how to do that, and how to approach it.
And I think that's a point perhaps to just flag that we do have another tool as well as our models called the aggregation module, that if you've used different models for different parts of a pathway or different services that you want to combine together, then the aggregation module then does allow you to join up several of our different models to give you either a whole pathway or a whole service overview, which can be really useful and has got some really good visualizations within it that you can use. And again, there are blank and populated versions on the website.
I'm going to very quickly move us on because I'm aware that we're at 11 o'clock and I'm sure people have got meetings that they have to dash off for, and I think people are having to leave. I'd really appreciate it if people, before they go, could, so we might actually skip this bit, I think. This is the Future NHS platform, which you'll be having an invitation to. Have a little look. I think it's a really good place to connect. But probably the bit I particularly want people to do before they go is if you can fill out our evaluation form. We will also be emailing it to you. So if you don't have time to do it right now, please do it afterwards. We spend quite a lot of time looking at feedback and changing our training. So if you've ever filled in feedback and thought, oh, well, this never goes anywhere, we really do update things. So if you want the tone of the course to be slightly different, this is your chance to say, please do fill it in. Quite happy for us to carry on answering questions, but I just was aware that for those who do need to rush off, if you're anything like me, people often have to run from one Teams to the other, then please do, if you get a chance, fill this in before you go. And I'll just have a little look and see if we've got any other questions that have come up. Sorry, Matthew. So while people are doing that, I don't think there are any new questions actually. But yeah, please do let us know how you found today and what you think. And I look forward to seeing you all next week.